We have a breaking news story coming out of the Kremlin, and listen, this video is going to be important. Even if you're a Trump supporter, I want you to stick around and watch because I'm going to demonstrate in this short amount of time that Russia has been waging informational warfare on the United States, and they have won. Their informational war has paid off in a huge way now that Donald Trump and the Republican Party have essentially been tricked by Vladimir Putin, and now all that Putin's doing is twisting the knife as Trump realigns America's stance, America's position on the global stage to be more aligned with Russia. And if you don't believe me, take it from Dmitry Peskov, who is Vladimir Putin's spokesperson. He just said in the halls of the Kremlin that the U.S. is rapidly changing their foreign policy configurations and that it largely coincides with their vision of how the world should work. Again, let me read this one more time. Trump's foreign policy largely coincides with our vision, says Kremlin spokesperson, and we're only a month in. Let me recap what's happened over the past few weeks just so we're all on the same page. First of all, Trump claimed that Ukraine started the war, and this was like a week ago. This has all happened in about the past week of negotiations. Then, Trump called Zelensky a dictator. Number 3, the U.S. voted with Russia and North Korea to oppose the UN resolution condemning Russia's invasion. 4, Trump gives the ultimatum to take Ukraine minerals, even though Zelensky says there was no deal, only a framework that provides no security guarantees. And then Trump and his vice president, J.D. Vance, berate Zelensky like he is their child, spouting almost only lies, basically only lies in the Oval Office. And after all of this happens, Republicans have the gall to claim that Zelensky shouldn't have even stuck up for himself or responded in the Oval Office and that he provoked Trump and Vance by doing so. This says Russia bought the USA for pennies on the thousands of dollars, and that's what I want to get to with this video. You know, I have a few stories that I want to break down and weave together, and let's just start here. This is something that I'm very, very passionate about. I'm even thinking of going back to school. I'm thinking of going to college because I took a break 2 years in to continue working on my media career. But I'm thinking of going back and finishing and studying foreign relations or international relations or Russian propaganda in whatever way I can, because I think Russian propaganda is the biggest threat to the West, and I'll explain. But read this headline. As Trump warms to Putin, U.S. halts offensive cyber operations in Moscow. One more time. I mean, I never thought I would read a headline like this. This is insane. The party of Ronald Reagan is gone. Again, this headline says, as Trump warms up to Putin, the U.S. is halting its offensive cyber operations against Moscow, and Putin is licking his lips. At the same time, Elon Musk has been making a push to leave NATO and leave the United Nations. This is about worst case scenario. Ron Filipkowski says, and there it is. Putin's lifelong dream, after years of relentless Russian propaganda, now fully embraced by the American president and the world's richest oligarch, millions of Americans are convinced that this is a good plan because Europe is an enemy and Putin is our friend. And here is Elon Musk saying that he agrees with the idea that the U.S. should leave NATO and leave the UN, and this gets 42 million views. I'm just going to be as blunt as possible regarding how I feel about this. Russia is whooping our ass in the information war, and this is perfect proof. Elon gets 42 million views, and any Democratic representative who would want to push back would probably get a fraction of those views. And right when Russian propaganda is hitting its peak, it's just really taking a bunch of wins, Trump halts our offensive cyber operations against Moscow, therefore just ceding all of this ground. You could not give Vladimir Putin a bigger win on a silver platter if he asked. This proves that Russia is playing ball when it comes to propaganda at like a college level, and the United States is still playing at a kindergarten level. We don't even know we're in the game right now. And just to back up for 1 second, again, Russian propaganda is something that we need to all understand because they've been refining their psyops, their psychological operations, since the Cold War. And in 2014, they really ramped it up and began to invest, some people say trillions of dollars, but we know that it's hundreds of billions of dollars in this psychological manipulation of the West. And there are a few main goals, and this is very important. There are a few main goals. Number 1, create division and chaos among Western countries. You can do that by amplifying existing social tensions, racial tensions, political tensions. Just create division across citizens in these countries. Then you undermine democracy by eroding trust in elections in any way you can, like maybe sparking an election fraud lie and helping Donald Trump push it relentlessly on social media. You undermine the media, like the journalists. You undermine government institutions and say they're all corrupt and need to be torn down, like Elon Musk is. And then finally, what you want to do is discredit the US and NATO abroad. The moment that Putin is able to push a narrative that weakens our alliance, the alliances that prevent him from invading countries, he's taking a massive win and can then advance Russian influence across Europe. And look at this. Our influence is waning on the global stage, not because of some accidental loss that we took, but because the American people voted Donald Trump in, and he very intentionally made this happen. Really quickly, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered U.S. Cyber Command to halt offensive cyber and information operations against Russia as President Donald Trump seeks to end President Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine on terms that are widely seen as favoring Moscow. They are favoring Moscow. Again, a peace deal without security guarantees isn't even a peace deal. It's just a piece of paper at the end of the day. So Putin has those main goals: sow division, undermine faith in democracy, make Americans skeptical of their own institutions, turn them against their own institutions. And the final, the huge one, what you want to do, if you're Vladimir Putin at least, is break apart U.S. alliances so that Russia faces no real opposition on the world stage. And that is what we are currently seeing. As Trump withdraws from our cyber operations, as we see really quickly Trump's foreign policy coinciding with the Kremlin, and even beyond that, a Russian state media reporter just gained entry to the Oval Office for the Trump-Zelensky sit-down. And I'm not over-exaggerating when I say that Trump is now doing the Kremlin's work for them. It is a dream come true for the Kremlin, and now it opens up the opportunity for stuff like this. U.S. intel is showing that Russia and China are attempting to recruit disgruntled federal employees, sources say. So Trump and Elon Musk will fire our federal employees who have access to nuclear stockpiles and sensitive intel. And then, after they're disgruntled, Russia and China try to pick them up and get info, and we won't even know if this is happening anymore because starting today, the U.S. is halting our offensive cyber operations. We are halting cyber operations entirely against Moscow. And here's the thing. Number one, Trump says he's only doing this temporarily while they're in negotiations. That doesn't make sense whatsoever. Why would you lift any leverage we have? Why would you lift our offensive cyber operations when you're in the middle of negotiations? It makes zero sense. But also, it seems like this is all happening at once. And this is a key point right here. It seems like this is all happening at once. All of this Russian influence is coming out of nowhere, but it's actually the culmination of decades of Russian propaganda. And again, they've really ramped it up over this past decade or so since they invaded Crimea in 2014. It's really a case of the frog boiling in the pot, which is obviously a fake story, but it essentially says that if you toss a frog into a boiling pot of water, they'll jump out because they'll feel all the heat. But if you put the frog in a pot and then boil the water from room temperature or whatever, you slowly boil it, they won't feel it. They won't feel it, and then it'll get them. They won't feel the heat as it raises around them, and that's what's happening to us. We don't feel the temperature or the Russian propaganda until it's too late, and now we see all of these stories coming out at once, and it really isn't a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. Let's dig a little bit deeper into these dangers. So, again, Trump's foreign policy, quote, largely coincides with our vision, says Kremlin spokesperson. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that foreign policies under U.S. President Trump largely coincide with the Kremlin's. Quote, the new U.S. administration is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations. This largely coincides with our vision, Peskov said in a commentary from Moscow Kremlin Putin, a program on the Rossiya 1 TV channel. I mean, what a name for a Russian propaganda show. Moscow, Kremlin, Putin. A little bit on the nose. And again, this is no coincidence. The Kremlin has taken a lot of very intentional steps to get right-wingers in the U.S., Republicans in the U.S., under their thumb, and also with a few strokes of luck by having Republicans genuinely like a narcissistic freak who Putin can suck up to and flatter and be transactional with. But for decades, especially this past decade, they've been refining stuff with the IRA, which was Russia's Internet Research Agency. It was a Russian troll farm that was mass producing divisive content and injecting it into the feeds of hundreds of millions of Americans. They also have state media They'll manipulate social media. They'll micro-target famous people. I mean, I've seen theories that people like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan have their feed targeted by Russian bots so that they can disseminate disinformation to their followers on their platforms. And I actually believe that. When Elon Musk is openly tweeting to pull us out of NATO, his end game here couldn't be anything more than to destabilize the US. And the thing is, President Biden puts a failsafe in place. So if Trump tries to pull us out of NATO, Congress has to step in and it has to be approved by Congress. But there's ways to go around this. If Trump just says one day on TV, I am no longer going to follow Article 5, and if an ally gets invaded, we're not coming to their rescue, NATO is as good as dead right there. We don't even have to officially pull out via the law. NATO is dead if Article 5 is dead, because NATO only works if all of the countries within it are incredibly predictable. I mean, the absolute certainty that all the countries will band together and fight back if you invade one of them is enough to deter Putin. It's been enough. It's been enough for decades. We have seen a lot of peace and prosperity among these Western nations because of NATO, and particularly because of Article 5. So again, I'm going to be blunt. Pulling out of NATO or even pushing away Article 5 would be the greatest geopolitical victory for Russia in like a century, at least in a few decades, because NATO exists purely as a deterrent system, as a defensive alliance. It prevents Russia from invading European countries by making it clear that an attack on one is an attack on all. So if Trump says, I'm not going to follow Article 5, the alliance collapses. NATO is entirely useless if that happens, because then Russia will continue to invade more countries, likely the Baltic countries, which are NATO countries on Russia's border. They've never posed a threat. They are purely defensive. They are in NATO for defensive reasons. But when they attack the Baltic countries, Europe then scrambles for new defense strategies and isn't quite as prepared as they should be. I mean, the onus is on NATO to also protect themselves. But the US then loses all of our global credibility. Russia expands its sphere of influence, continues to invade. China and Russia then collectively divide the world into spheres of influence, where the US is completely alienated from Europe. And then we are back 100 years. We're back to where we were in 1925. And all of the lessons that we learned from World War II are gone because Russia successfully spread enough propaganda. So Russian media getting in the White House, Donald Trump pausing our information warfare on Russia, it's all a straight up gift, especially after Russia has spent years embedding itself in American digital infrastructure through hacks. They've hacked into our energy grids. If you don't believe me, look it up. They have hacked into our energy grids. They have planted disinformation in our government. They've interfered in our elections time and time again, and we are in this massively invisible Cold War. I don't even mean to be dramatic. I should write a whole Substack article about how we are in this invisible Cold War. If you want to see that, let me know in the comment section. I'll leave it at that. Drop a like, subscribe. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you all for 1 million. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.